Before I read the word, I just want to say one thing about the Thanksgiving banquet and what's going on. This is, I think, would be our fourth year, possibly. My memory is not always that great about things like this, but we did have a couple of years when we were invited to a rather well put together banquet facility at the restaurant at Lilac Garden in Bluebell. It turns out that this year is probably the last year they could offer it because they're actually in the process of transaction to sell the restaurant. Mr. Sui's parents are now elderly and they are in Taiwan, and they do want to go back and visit or even stay with them for an extended amount of time, and that's the plan. So this is the last time, most likely, that we will have that facility. And they actually do a buffet lunch or dinner. It's sort of an early dinner. And they're very generous to offer us at a fraction of the cost. When you think about the fact that we're also using their banquet facility to the full. So it's not like it's free, and it's not like the churches as a community just able to pay for the whole meal. So that's where we have donation, but it's actually not meant that you give as you want. But each meal is going to be calculated at $15 per person. I'm going to let you know that. But the reason why we say free offering or free will offering is because some of us may find it difficult, and that may not be a large number of people, but maybe a few, some, for them to pay for the whole family might be a stretch. That's the idea. So if there are those who are willing to participate in a more generous giving for the event, because church does need to provide other things, gratuity and stuff like that. So plus whatever that goes into preparing for the day. So if there are people that are willing to be more generous, more than their portion, that would be done. So the idea is not that you become very conveniently absent in giving, but the idea is that you give so that those who give more may be filling the needs of those who cannot give as much. So that's why we do this. We could easily make it into a fee-paying event, but we've done it. And each year, generally, we have done well. But I did notice that every year it goes a little lower. It's strange, but we get used to it, and people give less. So last year, we had to put in quite a bit of a budget to cover that. So that's not the plan. So please participate as you desire from your heart. You should desire. Psalm 139. And by the way, please answer to the online reservation for the event. We do need the number so they could prepare the right amount of food. 139. Psalm 139. So last week we went from 135 to 139 until last night. So that's where we are. I'm going to speak to you from Psalm 139. To the choir master, a psalm of David. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and you are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot obtain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, which is a place of death, it's a grave, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. For you formed my inward parts, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I wake, and I'm still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God! O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. And if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. This is a very famous song. If you didn't know it before, it's famous. Take my word for it. For example, you just sang 2 songs based on this song. The words are taken out of this song because it's rather beautiful and challenging at the same time. Songs are not particularly known to contain a whole lot of doctrines. I guess biblical scholars or theologians wouldn't actually look to Psalms to arrive at some very delicate and very complicated doctrines. However, Psalm 139 is really, in many ways, an important base for us to talk about the doctrines that we know rather well. For example, the doctrine that God is all-knowing. A technical word is omniscience of God. God knows everything. This song is a good example of it. It's a good base to talk about it. God knew everything from beginning to the end. And it's very personally put. God knew me even before I was formed, even before a day of my life began. God had my entire day counted for. You know everything about me. You know the inmost thoughts. You know what words are at the tip of my tongue. Sometimes I can't say it, but you know it already. God, you know everything. You know everything about all things. Another important doctrine would be the doctrine of God's omnipresence. God is everywhere. God is everywhere, always there. So temporarily, in terms of time, there's not a single moment God is absent. And in terms of space, there's no place that God would be absent. God is everywhere. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? I mean, we do talk about God in a localized way. God is enthroned in the heavenly place. But in terms of the ministry and the operation of the triune God, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we can genuinely say, God is everywhere, God knows everything, God searches out all things. So that's a doctrine that all of us know, and I don't think there's anybody here who would deny that or want to deny it. There are a couple of attribute types in God. So one attribute type is called the communicable attributes. So such things as God's moral character. God is love, God is long-suffering, He endures, God is holy, God is merciful, and things like that. We call it communicable attributes because though our love is not the same as God's love, our mercy is not the same as God's mercy. They're not the same. Qualitatively, they couldn't be the same. Yet, we follow after Him. So God says, love one another as I have loved you. God would say, forbear with one another, forgive one another as I have forgiven you. Have mercy upon one another as I have mercy on you. Be holy as I am holy. So those are called the communicable attributes. And I don't think people ever deny that. There's not a single even some very liberal thinking people that like to shape God in their own imagination. They still like to think of God as morally good. God is love, God is merciful, God is long-suffering. But when it comes to the other attributes, so-called the incommunicable attributes, the attributes that are uniquely God's, some people like to deny that because it's very convenient to think of God in that way. Because they're starting from themselves, not from the Word of God. So we're not like that, right? We go from the Word of God, so we affirm God's uniqueness. For example, God is completely independent. We're not, but God is completely independent. God's knowledge is perfect. God knows all things. For example, God is everywhere. How is that possible for us? It's never, but God is like that. God is almighty. God can do all things. So we could think about God in this unique way. And this is what we're celebrating today. We think of God, and God is all-knowing, God is all-present. And this is God we serve. This is God we know. Okay, well, having said that, I'd like to ask you personal questions. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the fact that God knows everything? God searches you out from inside out. God is everywhere at every time in your life. Is this a comforting thought, or is this a rather strange and fearful thought that I have no sort of unsurveillance moment in my life? Maybe this book is way outdated for you, but I don't know if you know the novel by George Orwell called 1984. It's a classic. So I lived through 1984. I went to college in 1984. And the theme of our Humanity Core was 1984 because we were living that moment, right? And it was rather scary to even think about it. It's a fictional place called Oceania, and Oceania is completely dominated by this totalitarian tyrant. There's no truth in that country, that nation. Why? Because everything's propaganda, completely controlled. And that one image that it's hard to get away from is that image of TV monitors everywhere. And then the phrase that's written up everywhere, Big Brother is watching you. Okay? So you think about that as, wow, what a horrible life to be in this kind of tyrannical, totalitarian state where you are absolutely monitored on everything and you have no freedom. You have no freedom. There was a movie made about North Korea, the life in Pyongyang, which is the capital city. And Pyongyang's life is actually pretty good. It's an elite city, and only the elites can live there. Nobody can make their choice to live in Pyongyang. You have to be the right people to live there. So it was a documentary movie about a couple of girls who were participating in the mass game. The movie was called A State of Mind. It's a very clever title. It's documented by a couple of reporters from BBC. They went in and they filmed everything by the full allowance by the government. The movie was so well made aesthetically in every way. It actually won an award from Pyongyang, from North Korean government. But I don't know what they were thinking, because if you really watch it, there's a lot of subliminal, not even subliminal, pretty obvious message about how there is this strangeness about this country. People are crying out for freedom. Even the songs that they play in the background, there's a lot of that. And there's one scene that's very difficult for me to forget, is the scene where each outstanding citizens of Pyongyang are given their own apartment to live. That's a good deal. Free apartment from the government, so they get these apartments. But one thing about these apartments is that every apartment has a speaker monitor. That's there in the center of their house. You can't turn that off. That's what they say. You can't turn that off. You could lower the volume, but you still cannot turn it off. Okay? You can't undo the wire. If you did it, you will be kicked out of Pyongyang or something worse. So it's always on, so you always hear whatever is being said, and and it's usually playing some kind of propaganda and the music of some sort, like march and stuff. But you have this sneaking suspicion that they could hear you from the other side. So that's part of this movie that was awarded by North Korea. It's kind of strange. I would like to cut that out if I were in that situation. But think about that. This happened some time ago. So I walked into my office one day and I realized that the laptop that I had it on display, it's mounted laptop, so it's always on. Something wasn't right. Some things were not working as supposed to. So I was like kind of lost. I'm not very computer savvy, so I was really lost what to do. But one thing that I realized was that camera was on. Camera light was on. So I was thinking, how long has that been on? I didn't turn it on. I didn't even use it. So I do hear about this kind of hacking, that people could hack your computer, people could see you from the other side. So, my assistant pastor was very clever about it, said, that's why you have to cover the camera when you're not using it with a paper or tape of some sort. So that's what I had on camera. So I don't like that idea of being surveillanced all the time. It seems like there's so many CCTVs everywhere. You are most likely getting surveillance whether you like it or not. That's the reality of things. Okay, having said all that, how about this? How about the idea that God is always searching? God is always knowing. God is always there. Is this a oppressive thought or is this a comfortable thought? Okay. So I have to somehow make this kind of make sense to us, and I hope I'm not forcing this. I'm drawing out of this passage, and I'm going to quickly talk about three things. They're all somehow starting with letter C, and I don't even know if this will help you memorize this better, but the first word is condition. I'll explain what that means. Second word is celebration, and the third word is cleaning. So the first word, condition. This is the meditation that I had on this passage, and as I was reading it, to be honest, the way I'm presenting to you is exactly how I was thinking. God is monitoring me, God is watching me all the time, and how does this become a comfortable or even lovely thought, as he says. It's a lovely idea, he says. The fact that you know all about me is a beautiful, beautiful knowledge that I have of you. It's wonderful. So is it really? So one conclusion that I arrived at was this, that when you put A, B, C, D, E, F, Z all together, right? You put all together about who God is and why He does what He does and what He has done, you come to realize that God's omnipresence or God's constant presence with His creation is an essential condition for us to exist. In other words, if God weren't there, if God isn't doing what He's doing, then we would not be living like we do now. If the world was not sustained by God's ongoing providence is the word that matches in creation. Creation is what God made. Providence is what He does with the creation, that He sustains it. Right? There's not a single thing, even a life of an unbeliever, somebody would say, well, I don't need God. But even them, and this is a recurring thing, isn't it, in my preaching in the last few Sundays, even them, they would not physically survive if God withheld things for them. God's work, God's providence, and God's presence, all these things are necessary precondition for physical life to live. God needs to give sun and sunlight to all people. God needs to bring rain to all people. God is almighty. He's able to withhold. God is able to withhold His presence from people. But when that happens, your humanity runs out. You cannot be truly human outside of God's presence. I love the way C.S. Lewis describes hell. He says, hell is not made for human. Because when you go to hell, if you would go to hell, hopefully that will not happen to you, what is in the hell is not human, but it's something of a residue. And he calls it X-Man. What used to be man, but not man, not human, because no human or humanity can survive outside of God's presence. That's a great way to look at it. You really don't have the real humanity if you are outside of God's constant provision for you. You cannot live. A fish would never think of life outside of water because water is the essential condition by which you live. A human like you and me would never consider living outside of the atmosphere with sufficient amount of air. We wouldn't be able to. So if you were to go to a place where breathing is not possible normally, what do? We need to wear a special suit. We need to wear a special helmet. We need to have a supply of oxygen from oxygen tanks. It's a very, very difficult situation. Why? Because we couldn't live without the air. We could not live. It's an essential condition. You know this. Like if you suddenly have a stoppage in the satellite information, then your navigation will stop. The navigation will not work because there's no connection. Your phone is supplied by 4G, or now I guess some early stage of 5G environment, so to speak, that without the connectivity, what do you have? Nothing. Nothing works. You're dead. Your phone is dead without the connection. And that happens once in a while, doesn't it? If you buy a cheap service, like sometimes I experience, these things don't have a good coverage. And when you go to these places, it's dead. The illustration is very fitting. Your life is like that. And you might say, well, how come I'm living when I'm not even looking to God? How come I'm living when I'm not even searching for God? When I'm not in connection with God? Well, you think you're not in connection with God. If you really were not in connection with God, you wouldn't be here. You have to understand this. Both the common grace and the special grace. Common grace is for all men who are living. God provides for them so that they can have life, whether you know it or not. So, being a non-believer with no gratitude for God is really being a very bad person. Why? Because you're not thankful for what God is doing, obviously. You wouldn't be surviving. And it would be horrible that if you were living by the provision of your parents, it's the parents who give you the money to go to school, parents who give you money to live, parents who give you money to go out with your good favorite friends, and you never thank them as if, that doesn't really matter. Well, the truth is, you survive because of them. And that's exactly how it is. There are many, many people who are living outside of gratitude for God. Why? Because they just don't get it. They're not mature. They just don't understand the reality. But those of us who are able to read the scripture and know what's going on, we would say, God, thank you. Because outside of you, I would have no hope. Well, there are those who want to become like X-Men. Think about it. What happened? What is sin? Sin is basically saying to God, God, I don't need you. I want to be independent. I want to do it my way. Garden of Eden, that's exactly what happened. They said, well, I'm going to make my choice outside of God's command. God, forget it. I'm going to do it my way. But what do? They hide from God. That's the fall. And they hide from God. And partly they hid from God because they were ashamed of what they've done. But it's also natural because that's what they're doing. They're running away from God. But this is foolish. This is foolish because just like what God said, when you break this tie with me, when you choose to say, I don't need God, the consequence would be death. Like a phone that has no connection, you will die. Like a navigation that has no supply of satellite information, you will be dead. You wouldn't know what to do. Like a person left in a place without air, you shall not survive. The only reason why Adam and Eve continued to live physically is because even though they've sinned, God continued to provide them with His grace to live. But people continue to push God away, but they can't. In fact, more they do that, it just shows how foolish they are. So the first word I share with you from this passage is the condition. So think about it. What is described here is not something you pick and choose. It is not like you choose to be with God, you choose not to be with God, as if you are the boss. No, we are creatures. He's the creator. He's the environment in which we live. You can't choose the air. Air chooses you. You can't really be the one that says, well, I don't need this, I don't need that, because, well, you need it. That's how things are. And it's not oppressive. It's what gives us freedom to be what we are. So you have to think about that. It's a beautiful doctrine. Second word that I want to share with you is the word celebration. And this is what I thought. I said, hey, I realized that a good theology means information about God and who He is, right? Good information, true information about God. Theology, study of God, or word about God. Good theology will result in a life of celebration. Another word to use for that celebration is worship. You worship God because you have good information about who God is. It's very interesting how the psalmist is dealing with this information, right? Look at verse 1. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. Okay, that's not a suggestion. That's not like, well, what if you do this? No. This is a statement. Lord, you have searched me and you know me. This is a fact. You know me. You search me because you are everywhere. Wherever I am, you are there. I can never get away from you. You are always there. So you search me, and because you know all things, you know me inside out. You knew me even before I was born. You know me. Okay? That's declaration. That's a good theology. God knows everything. But what does He say in verse 23 as a conclusion? He says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. That's interesting. Is he kind of losing his logic here? No, he's not. He's celebrating. He's saying, God, you search me, and you have known me, you know everything about me, and that's the fact. He knows this is good theology. And what do? You celebrate this by saying, God, search me and know me. Delightfully, we say it, because it is only right. This is not a suggestion. This is not permission. What permission? God already searched you. Not a permission. What is it? It's a celebration. But that's not the only thing. This, for example, it says, verse 2, you know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. So God knows my thinking, right? Verse 4, even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it completely. You know it altogether. Before the word is spoken, you know the words that I am saying. Okay? Then, what do you do? What do you do? Wow. If God knows everything, God knows all my thoughts, God knows all my words, what do? You pray. And you might say, why pray? Why do I tell God what I think? Why do I express in words things that God would already know? The result is not that good theology gives us reason to do nothing, but a good theology gives us reason to celebrate it. We speak to you, we tell you because you already know. This is really, really good. I love it. I love it because I can relate this to my life very well. Imagine a situation where you have somebody that you know really well coming into your room or your office or wherever you're meeting that person. Like last night, I had a couple of guests visiting me late afternoon in my office because they had something very, very deep to say. They had a lot of anxiety and just so much welled up inside of them, and they took a long, long time to take up the courage to come and talk to me, but I knew exactly what they were going to talk about, because everybody else told me what they were going to talk about. So they came, and the first words they said was, well, Pastor, you know everything. Well, I don't know everything, but I told them, I think I know mostly what you're going to talk about, but I do want to hear it from you. So imagine a scenario for you, right? So you are hearing somebody that you love, that you really deeply care for. This is somebody that you really worry about. They're there, and they are speaking out their minds. And they begin to talk about it, and it hurts them so much to even talk about it, and they begin to shed tears. And you see how difficult it is for them to continue to talk about it. And one of the ways that you comfort them is by saying, oh, stop. I know exactly how you feel. I know all that you really want to say. You don't need to say it. You don't need to say it. But as more they hear that, as more they are comforted by the words like, well, I know exactly how you're feeling. I know exactly what you're thinking. You know how they want to say more? They're like bawling. Oh, and they're saying, you know, right? You know, right? And then they say more. They say more and more and more. Wouldn't you hate to go to a therapist who doesn't understand what you're saying? You go to a therapist and say, I had this really anxious thought and this is what's going on. And they say something completely opposite, like, oh, you mean that? No, that's not what I mean. I mean this. Can you imagine a situation where a guy's so bad? You never pay a guy to do something like that. You pay a good therapist a lot of money. Why? Because a good therapist understands and knows what you're saying. Sometimes they pretend, They learn the technique. It's the Rosarian clients that are technique from way back. I mean, this is really old. All you have to do is just repeat what they say back. Oh, you mean this? Oh, yeah. People like to hear back their thoughts. Somebody that really empathizes with them. Somebody who really understands who they are. But here we have a situation where God knows you so thoroughly. All you're doing is just basically telling God what He already knows. And it's so comfortable because you don't have to persuade it. There's a difference between friendly conversation and a persuasion of a hostile enemy. God is not a hostile enemy. God is not somebody you need to persuade. God knows your heart. Even your evil thoughts, God knows. God understands your struggles. So when you repent, sometimes I have heard that when you repent, you have to repent very precisely. Homologein, which means to confess. Homologos, which means what? Saying words. Whatever you did, you have to exactly say it. That's confession. So when you repent to God, you need to say everything in detail, like at a law court. I'm not really sure about that. I think you could repent. But of course, repentance has to be sincere. But when you do repent, it's not like God does not understand. God knows. Still one of the most beautiful prayers that I ever heard in my ministry, was one of those late night prayer meetings when lights were off and there were a few people praying around me. And we're not supposed to listen to one another, we're supposed to just pray, but I was listening to this lady pray. Be careful what you pray around me. I didn't want to listen, but I couldn't help but to listen. Her prayer was very simple. I kind of knew about her situation. I knew how difficult it was. How her life seemed to be so blocked off from any relief. I kind of knew. And you know what she prayed? She didn't pray, Lord, help me. Lord, do this. This is what I'm going through. All she said over and over again was, God, you know, right? God, you know, right? It's just went. That's how God is. That's how God is. It's beautiful the way the psalmist puts it. God's all-knowing, all-present being is like this. Verse 5, you hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. I love that. It's like a parent on a cold night walks into children's room as they are sleeping. They realize that their blankets are off. It's cold, so the parents would come in and do what? You hem them in to the blanket, with a blanket. You don't just cover him or her. You fold it in. Make sure the air is tight, so the child will sleep comfortably, warmly. And you cover them. So here's an idea of God. God's presence is hemming me in. God protects me. And the last picture of God laying his hands on me. It's like the picture of Moses when Moses said to God, God, show me your glory. And God said, well, nobody looks at my glory and live. So what I'll do is I'll pass by you, but you cannot see me, because if you do see me, you cannot live, you cannot survive. God is so glorious. So God put Moses in a cleft of a rock, so like rock split, right? So like inside a big rock, huge rock. And then God places his hands on top to cover him. And then the glory of God passes by, declaring, God is glorious, God is glorious. He is mighty God, faithful, everlasting God, who is slow to be angry. He is ever so forgiving. The glory of God passes by while Moses is hemmed in, and his top is covered by God's hand. It's like the picture of the Ark of Noah. Did you read that passage carefully when the flood was about to begin? Who closed the door of the ark? Did God say, close the door now before the rain comes? It says no. If you read it carefully, you will realize that it's God who shut the door. It's God who came and put his hands on top. It's God hemming them. So you celebrate this God. God knows. Finally, clinging. And this clinging is what makes our lives very challenging every day. And the way the psalmist expresses it is this. He says, well, I know, God, you're so glorious and you're so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for all that you've done, but this is what I do. He says, verse 21, do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. It's like he's saying, God, your enemies are my enemies. Those who hate you, I hate them. I hate them so completely. And this is not some, a low class, low blow. No. What he's saying is that, God, knowing this about you, and as I celebrate who you are, one thing that I determined to do is that I'm going to be so on your side. I'm going to cling to you so completely. I will not hang out with those people who hate you. I will not hang out with those people who do not understand this and belittle you. That's why this psalmist, who's known as David, is the person who understands Psalm 1. Psalm 1 is clearly the introduction to all 150 Psalms. And Psalm 1 begins with these words, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of mockers. That's the blessing. Blessing is that I will not side with those who are enemies of God. Who are the enemies of God? Well, it's Satan and the company and all those who simply follow after them. It's not hard to see. Genesis 3 is so revealing. Satan is a liar. Satan is a murderer. Jesus is the one who said in chapter 17, well, I'm sorry, not chapter 17, that's the next one. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. Where he describes what Satan is doing. And he's telling the Jews, you are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He's a murderer from the beginning. Well, you really follow the desire of the devil. desires of the devil following them is exactly what Adam and Eve did. And the murder is exactly what Cain did. Cain versus Abel. And does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. There's no truth in the devil. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character. For he is a liar and the father of lies. The old version actually says when he speaks, when he lies, he's speaking his native language. This is his heart language. What's your heart language? Well, when Satan says, which sounds like truth, you will realize that he speaks with accent. Did you get that? Did you get what I just said? It wouldn't sound right. But when he lies, it sounds so right because he is speaking his native language. Okay? So the healthy congregation would understand when some faulty message is being said, when things are said out of the character of the scripture, you will hear it and you say, well, that's Satan. You kind of know. You feel it. Wow. That's something against God. So here's an idea that you cling so close to God because you know who He is. You know who He is. I love what Jesus said in chapter 17 of John. Jesus said that they may be one just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us. Well, we talked about union with Christ and communion with Christ last weekend. How beautiful is it what Jesus came to offer? Chapter 5 Romans, no more condemnation in Christ. Why? How can we be so intimate with God and not find ourselves so scared of it? How can we, in the midst of God's holiness, and not be destroyed by it? It's because we are in peace, at peace with God through Jesus Christ. This is why we repent. It's like standing before a good parent or coming to a good parent means what? You are able to say your heart, your mind. You don't try to manipulate that. You say it. You tell them how things are. I love my sons I love them all the time, but I especially love them when they come with hard things to say. They come and tell me things that they are not so proud of. You know how sons or daughters don't want to talk about their love life, right? Because parents are always bugging, are you seeing somebody? Parents are interested. I love it when my sons, or especially these days, I hang out with my second son sometimes. He's home, so I don't see him all the time, but he's around, so I'm interested. Are you having anything going on? So he tells me sometimes. He has to say, Dad, don't ask me. But there are times when he says, oh, Dad, I kind of was interested in this girl, but turned out she's seeing somebody else. As a father, I completely connect with it. And he's saying it to me. He's clinging to me. And he's able to do that. Why? Because I'm not going to tell him, you moron. Didn't you even know? I don't do that because I don't think he is a moron. Even when he fails, when he gets struck out with 3 strikes, it's not going to be the case as a father to tell him, hey, you're not good enough. But I will always say, I'm with you. That's what repentance is. When you have something against God in your heart, when you know that something's not quite rightly settled with God, don't wait for time to cure it. Sin is not cured by time. Sin is cured by repentance. So almost immediately, whenever you think anything's between you and God, you speak to God. God, this is how it is. And my heart, I have no peace. But I need peace with you in Jesus Christ. Offer to you already. Christ in you, you in Him. Father, Jesus, they're one. Father in me, I in you, and then all these people in us. We are united as one. This is not a foreign message to me because there were moments when I really felt psychologically vulnerable and weak. I suffered through some very tough times too, and people don't really know that a lot, even though I always said it, they never believed it. I said, this is what I went through, this is what I went through. And in those very vulnerable moments, what saved me was a good theology. I knew that God was the rock on which I clung, and I didn't have to cling to him because he was so on me. All I had to do was just always realize I am never outside of his concern. He's with me. I may be, flipping around in the wind of my anxiety, but when I stick right onto the rock who is God, he will steady me whenever I'm with him. Okay, and he's with me. He hands me in. He covers me with his hands. That's what kept me alive. So I know what it means to live. Even when storms pass by, even when things seem kind of rough, hang there, guys. Look to him. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this psalm, which is so beautifully written, not as a reason for us to feel oppressed, but rather be free to know that you are the very condition in which we live. The reality of you is what we celebrate and worship, and as a result, we rejoice in clinging to you because you cling closer to us than a brother or even friend. You are our God. In you we live, we move, and we have our being. Be glorified in us and be with us, especially in the specifics of our lives. Many things about what we go through now, about which we would not even bother to say everything because yet we would come to you in prayer and seek after you because you already have sought after